Hey, good afternoon. My name is Roxy Robinette, and I was asked to talk to you about the science of reading. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Get my key working there. There we go. All right, so what is the science of reading and why is it important? So science of reading is research. And a lot of scholars did a lot of research to find out how children learn, how people learn, and what matters in learning reading. So the National Reading Panel was set up to help identify just that. They parsed through thousands of scholarly articles to determine the most effective um, methods when it comes to reading, teaching reading, but also the core elements of teaching reading and what it takes to read. So, and one thing I want to point out is that early reading is a developmental process. So it needs to be taught intentionally, systematically, and explicitly. And then, as I mentioned, the NRP identified 5 core elements. So I will talk about those core elements here in just a second. All right, so what are those core elements? Phonemic awareness, and I will define these in the next slide, so hang with me. Phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So let's go ahead and move on to phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is the ability to identify and manipulate individual sounds in spoken words. I want to emphasize that again, spoken words. So we're not worrying about reading just yet. We are building the basis of what children know. They know how to speak. They don't know how to read or write, most likely, especially kindergartners and maybe first graders, depending on if they started kindergarten or not. So we're working on the very basic sounds and spoken words. So what are some teaching strategies that we could use? You'll hear me use modeling a lot in these next core elements, and it's because it's important for children to see us do it correctly, and so they can copy us exactly and memorize it and learn it. We also want to make the phonemes memorable. So one thing you can do to have them draw pictures, so have them draw a tiger, T for tiger, T, or dance or come up with a song to associate goes for tiger. You can also teach phonemes one at a time. This is so you don't overwhelm the students. This is so they don't tune out because they've gotten overwhelmed, and so you can make sure that they really understand each phoneme. And then you can also show children how the phonemes apply to reading and writing real words. Most children want to get to that point of reading and writing, and so if you can show them how you can write cat by knowing the sounds, then they get real motivated and real excited. So that's very important for that. So let's move on to phonics. And what that is a teaching method that helps students relate spoken sounds to written symbols. So here's where we're starting to associate those sounds to letters. So that same knowledge of spoken sounds to written symbols can help students decode printed words. Some teaching strategies for here. Blending. So that's where the reader's going to read the word left to right and say the individual sounds. Or the sound the letter makes, excuse me. So cat, we'd start with k, t, cat. That'd be how we put it all together. So segmenting is another teaching strategy, and that is where our reader stretches out the words to write down a letter for the individual sounds that they hear. So cat again, and cat can get kind of boring, but it's a good basic one for everybody to understand. Cat, so it'd be cat, cat. So I would write down maybe a K or a C, an A for the A, and the T for T. And then we can also do spelling and learning instruction. It's very similar to segmenting, kind of builds on it. So our children would learn phonics through writing. Kind of invented spelling, so I just alluded to that with segmenting, where I would write a C or a K for cat. And that's okay because eventually they will learn the correct spelling, but we want to make sure those words are associated with that sound, or those letters are associated with that sound. And then we can also teach sight words using the Drastic strategy. So you want to see the word, see how it's written, say the word, have them spell the word out loud. I should say spell the word out loud. Write the word down. Check the word to see if you wrote it down. And then you can also have students find the word in print, verbally spell it out loud, and then cut letters out to even spell the word. That just gives more and more exposure. The more you expose the students to all of that, the more that they learn and they retain. So let's go ahead and move on to our next slide of fluency. Fluency is basically accurate, effortless, automatic word identification. It's also appropriate age and grade level reading rate. It is also the appropriate use of expression and correct text phrasing, which is also known as scooping, where you pause at commas, stop at periods, and so on and so forth. And also, make it a question sound as with question marks. So what are some teaching strategies? Well, you can model reading fluency. And in fact, that is the #1 way you want to do it. So if I'm reading a story about Flopsy Mopsy and Peter and Cottontail, I want to tell the students exactly how to read it, how fast I should read it, and model that, show them exactly how to do it. So the next teaching strategy is monitoring and accountability. So that is where, when they are silent reading, you stop in and you ask them to either maybe read a portion of the text that they're on, or to tell you what's going on in the book, or tell you what their favorite part is, or you can even have them draw a picture of their favorite scene or favorite happening in that event in that book so far. And then we also have, for our last strategy, wide and repeated readings. So repeated readings are important because that is how you develop automaticity. And it's at least 3 readings, for them to become automatic at it, more fluent. And then wide readings also are lots of different, different genres. So fantasy, informational, opinion, things like that. So let's go ahead and move on to our next slide of vocabulary. So vocabulary is the knowledge of words and their meaning. And it is also the absolute key to reading comprehension. So there are 4 types of vocabulary. There's listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So listening are the words that you hear and understand. Speaking are the words that we use correctly when we talk. Reading are the words that we can identify while we're reading and understand while we're reading. And then writing are the words that we know and use correctly while we're writing. So let's go over some teaching strategies. We want to teach words directly and incidentally. So what do I mean by that? We want to basically state the definition, and then we want to link the words to maybe synonyms. So we have similar meanings, antonyms, so we know what it is not, what are the opposites, examples of what that is, and then even maybe non-examples so that you know what it is not. So, a reptile would not be a chicken, or would not be a pig. And that's, that way you know exactly what it's not. And then the exposure is really what it's all about, to help them memorize it. So context determines meaning. So we need to teach our children that context determines meaning. And what that is where we, um, when we're reading, it just means what the paragraph will tell us what the word means essentially. How the paragraph is written might mean the word might mean one thing versus a different definition over here. And then we want multiple exposures to the word because that is how students learn it. So let's go ahead and move on. Comprehension. So this is our end goal of reading. Why reread? So it is intentional thinking about the meaning of text, and it is influenced by the reader's experience and knowledge. So teaching strategies, one of them we can ask questions at different levels of thinking. This is like Bloom's taxonomy. We want to activate the higher levels and also some of the lower levels. So QAR codes, or excuse me, QAR relationships, they push for that higher order thinking. You can say why was the author doing this? Or sometimes, you can also ask something that can be found directly in the book. So another thing we can do is question the author. Why did the character do that? What is the author telling me here? One of my favorite is Click or Clunk, and that is after reading a paragraph or a piece of text to stopping and think, did that make sense? If it did, it clicked. If it didn't, it clunked. And then finally, the Paris method. So we could teach them that. So we want to predict what might happen based on the cover of the book or some other information. We want to ask some questions to activate some prior knowledge. We want to retell the story, infer what might happen, and then summarize what happened. So you get the main points. All right, so let's move on. Finally, we have the 5-block reading writing essentials instruction model. So what is it? It is an approach to organize the day so all students receive the essential elements of reading. And those are the ones that we just talked about. So you can see here I have got a little diagram that I borrowed from Reutzel and Cooter. And it basically says we should have writing for 30 minutes, fluency for 30 minutes, comprehension for 30 minutes, word work for 30 minutes, and small group differentiated reading instruction practice for 60 minutes. So kindergarten would have those times. So word work for kindergarten, learning and writing the alphabet, decoding and spelling simple words, doing vocabulary instruction, and teaching like maybe prefixes, suffixes as you get older. So next one, writing. We would teach about word choice, organization, so structural organization about how we write and choose words and sentence, structure, things like that. And younger grades would more likely write letters, reports, poems, more simple things. Next, fluency. And I know I did those a little bit out of order there, but that's all right. We're going to hit them all. 30. Again, that's 30 minutes. We want to be able to do it in whole group and small group. So I would model for my students how I would want them to read it. And then we would break into maybe shoulder partners or small groups to continue on practicing, maybe back and forth, or I'll stop in and see how they're doing, or I would work with in smaller groups to continue on that practice. So comprehension, we want to explain our strategies that we're using and model it clearly so that the students know exactly what we're looking for, and then start scaffolding the process so that they can use it. And then small group differentiated instruction, that is our tiers. We want to help children boost their foundations if they are struggling, and give students that are not struggling appropriate work. And so here we just want to make sure that it is challenging enough that they learn, but not so challenging that they get frustrated. All right, so that is all I have. I thank you for your time, and I hope you have